Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you with Way of X #1. Now, first and foremost, if any of y'all understood the reference in the video title, a million brownie points to you. If you're not sure what it is, feel free to ask down in the comments because it's quite funny. Anyway, this book right here was both entertaining. It was actually relatively really well written. Hey, look at that. I haven't had enough coffee, and I was able to say that without stumbling. And also, as I said in the title of the video, supports my theory on a couple of X books that we've already gone over, and I'll reference them as we go. But I'm glad that this book really focuses on a fan favorite, which is Nightcrawler. And he's starting to see that things are not quite well in the state of Denmark, so to speak. We open up on Xavier having this nightmare, and we kind of see this horrific face in his mind. So we don't know if it's a nightmare or a telepathic connection. So Xavier reaches out to Nightcrawler, who's on they call it the Paris insertion. Yeah. Or Venice insertion, excuse me. Anyway, they're, of course, going to find more new mutants. Now, one thing that I will say to start talking about my theory here is when we first went over X-Men #7 from this Dawn of X line, remember how they were starting to talk about, not Carousel, I'm thinking of Logan's Run, the Crucible, where mutants that were depowered after M-Day, they're going into these arenas and are essentially murdered and reborn with their mutant powers. So, and everyone seems to be okay with it. And you kind of start to see that Professor Xavier is not the man that he is. Because here, Nightcrawler and Charles are having a telepathic conversation. And here, this does not sound like Charles at all. Nightcrawler says, "Professor, usually when people seek a priest in the small hours, it either follows a sin or precedes a death. Haven't you heard, Kirk? Mutants upgraded morality and beat mortality. I'm afraid your cassock has little to offer my conscience." So here it's like, again, these X-Men feel like pod people. There's no empathy or, you know, like the love that you used to feel like during the Claremont and the 90s run of the X-Men. Here, Xavier just does not seem like any type of admittance of what he's done to the mutant race or any type of repentance. Like, he's just full on, this is the way it is now. And I mean, look at the way that they draw him here, where his face is shrouded in shadows. It just kind of shows that Xavier is not the man that we once knew. Now, before we go any further, this is, if I pronounce this wrong, feel free to make fun of me down in the comments. But it's Si Spurrier doing the writing, Bob Quinn doing the art, Java Tartaglia doing the coloring, VC's Clayton Cowles doing the letters. Here's everyone else working on the book, and of course the X-Men were initially created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. The print date on this was June of this year, which we're not in June yet. That's just kind of how comics have always been. So the whole point of this Venice thing is there's these, of course, governments that want to take down the mutants, and they kind of make this hall of hate, or museum of hate. So you see Apocalypse initially before he joined Krakoa. We see Omega Red, and Pixie and all these people are just kind of disgusted by it for the most part. But here, because I believe this looks like Blink, so I think this is Blink. I think his name's DJ. This is Pixie, and I'm not sure who this character is supposed to be. Or this is Blink here in the back, and I'm not sure who that is. They kind of have similar facial markings. But here, the children of Krakoa, listen to how they talk to one another. She's going, Pixie's only like that because she hasn't had her first time yet. So at first you're thinking, oh, they're talking about the birds and the bees. But Pixie's like, I told you, I just don't want to do it. It's just not that big of a deal. Come on, Pix, you don't have to be so serious about it. If you're about to die, just think happy thoughts, favorite food, or whatever. Get resurrected with a smile. Well, that's no help, Loa. My favorite changes every day. Yesterday I fancied sushi. Today I can murder her for a cheese toasty. Aw, you're just chicken. I bet you think the Patchman will get you. Now, this Patchman character I think is kind of interesting. But here, again, you're thinking they're talking about the birds and the bees like teenagers do, but they're talking about Crucible. Because Pixie, even though she has her powers, hasn't died in any type of mission. These people have already been resurrected by the Five. And so they're giving their friend grief because she hasn't chosen to just die. What the heck kind of friends are these? These people on Krakoa have been so far removed from humanity and empathy and not apathy, but compassion, that to them death is just a joke now. Now this goes back to the comic that I referenced way back, the Uncanny X-Men 303, the death of Illyana. I remember how Jubilee was so upset that no matter what they do, they couldn't save Illyana, and she's just like, it's not fair. And her and Jean have a heart-to-heart. And, it's still not okay, but they kind of come to an understanding of what happens. And Jubilee does her best to, along with Kitty and Jean, to give Illyana her last remaining hours on Earth to play with her and show her everything that they can to show her compassion. And it's a really well-written issue. It hits you. You tear up every time you read it. But now, year 2021, these mutants, oh, you're just chicken. You haven't gone through your first death. Oh my God. Now, because of all this peer pressure, I don't want to go over everything, but these militiants find the mutants, and Pixie gives in to peer pressure. And the guy's like, stay back, Abomination, or I don't suppose you've got a cheese toasty about you. Now, as we're going through this review, keep in mind what Pixie said a moment ago, where she's saying, my favorites change from day to day. Yesterday I wanted sushi, today I wanted a cheese toasty. And so, boom. And then, spoiler alert, there are going to be spoilers. I apologize, but I need this to kind of help back up what I'm talking about. So, boom, right in the flipping face. Oh my God. So, Nightcrawler is furious. But listen to her disgusting friends. They're filming it on their phone like it's some freaking snuff film. And like, oh my God, that was awesome. That's not awesome. If there was a such thing as a resurrection, you would think that you would use it as sparingly as you could as a last minute resort. But these child mutants that are being raised on Krakoa are showing that death has no consequences. There's no actions. So to them, it's just another YouTube video. And Kurt chastises them. And all they can say is, you used to be fun. Now, Kurt finds something in this museum of hate that he brings to Krakoa, and he tries to kind of play a joke on Eric and kind of trying to be lighthearted. I don't want to give that part away. But what happens is, instead of Eric taking it as a joke for what it is, he goes, we've defeated death. We have shaken the world. We've built an empire of enlightenment. And all within our first year. Yes, those pitiful old toys are a gift, an invitation to forsake the past and seize a brave new future. And Kurt's trying to say it was just a joke, but Eric's not listening. He's just on this soapbox that won't stop. So again, there seems to be some sitting and talking, but it goes somewhere it means something. So I don't mind it, because even though you're not getting action on the page, what you're reading, you're just like, holy moly. They get on to Crucible, and Eric goes, of course, Crucible. That's what this is about. It's tonight, isn't it? It's murder, Eric. Pfft, the world's first post-moral society, and you're worried about sinning against your dusty god. You would think Eric would have some understanding after his backstory with the Holocaust. And here he is just telling Kurt that he's chasing invisible ghosts, essentially. So again, the artwork for the most part, like I said, even though there's a lot of sitting, the story itself is very poignant and it makes sense. But I do appreciate that the panels are simple. I mean, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but at least to an extent they're dynamic. Like Kurt finds this woman seeking Krakoa. You see her foot, and then you finally see her enter the frame. We get these moments of someone peeking in the bushes at Nightcrawler. So overall, it's okay. And then another thing that I haven't gone over, well, I have, but that was back on the old channel when I went over Powers of 10 and House of X. Whenever Crucible's about the... No, it wasn't those. I apologize. It was that X-Men number 7. Exodus talks to the children and asks them if they understand what Crucible is about. But you kind of start to see that that's starting to crumble here, because people are starting to talk about the Patchwork Man, and Exodus is like, let's stay on task. And he even kind of starts to seem a little faltered. He goes, no, child, the Scarlet Witch, she cast a foul spell to devour almost 1 million of our kind. And you can start to see that they don't really care. They're saying, I heard the Patchwork Man makes you cut off your own face. So, again, this just does not feel like X-Men. And this, to me, does not look like Dr. Nemesis. Like, he's trying to, evolve, evolve himself, which is a little obnoxious, but it helps for the story, because Kurt tries to seek him and talk to him about everything that's going on. And just like with everyone else on Krakoa, other than Wolverine, they're just buying into this. So here, you kind of see him holding his rosary. And Nemesis, just kind of being, I believe it's apathetic is the word I'm looking for, says, in the absence of a truly remarkable mind expander to rapture us all out of this pigsty of a dimension, I'd rather pinned my hopes on you. I heard you were working on something unifying. Because if you remember in that X-Men number 7 issue, Kurt said he wanted to start a mutant religion. Well, now he's starting to second guess himself. And what if I have to share, and what if I have to share ideas? What happens if I cannot find these social rituals? So I think what they're trying to set up is how Kurt has a a strike, like a questioning of faith, but it's more towards the mutant race instead of God. And that's why I think that they use this as a juxtaposition here. Now check out what Nemesis says. He goes, theoretically speaking, violent societal collapse, but don't worry. The likelier outcome is that the strongest individuals simply invent rituals of their own. And again, I like the segue from that to Crucible. And you just see Eric savagely ripping this person apart. So essentially what Nemesis is saying is if you don't try to find some sort of cohesive societal harmony that you're talking about, then things like this are going to happen. And again, I kind of like how as Crucible's happening, Nightcrawler has a moment of realization on who Eric is fighting, which I don't want to spoil. But he actually intervenes. And he goes, this is senseless. She's not a fighter. All you're doing is hurting her. And again, Eric, just seeming cold and callous, continues on with this onslaught. I don't want to give that part away. The last thing I do want to talk about here is Pixie does get resurrected. So after Kurt was talking to her at the Museum of Hate, remember I said, think about what she said. Kurt comes to her. He goes, oh, hey, Kurt. And he tries to have some compassion to her, and he goes, welcome back, Liebling. Liebling, here, a cheese toasty. Your favorite, yeah? Oh, thanks, that's... Actually, Kurt, I don't want to seem rude, but all I can think about right now is sushi. So think about what we talked about at the beginning of this review and then come back to this panel. And then finally, the last two things, he's talking to Professor X after the resurrection. And Kurt's talking about how there's something terrible just out of sight, waiting for cracks to appear. From what I can tell, its actions are marked by surges of negative emotion, fear, anger, misery. I suspect it's preying on us, dreams, nightmares, moments of weakness. And all this going on, you can see that it's tormenting Kurt Wagner. Why? Read this story in full. I may be reading this wrong, but I really appreciate that, what's his name, Si Spurrier, is starting to point out how this Krakoan society feels more like a cult. The X-Men that we've all known and loved feel like pod people. Professor X, when he used to be the most compassionate of all of us, doesn't care for Kirk's dusty god. Or that the children of Krakoa are just saying, oh, come on, just take your first death, as where Jubilee, back in 303, I believe it was mad because there was nothing she could do to save Ileana, and it humanized the issue because everyone can cope with that feeling of the loss of a loved one. These new X books, what stakes are there if you can just come back to life? Why do you care about these characters if all they are is not apathetic, but jaded? No consequences whatsoever. And Kurt is seeing the cracks. So guys, Way of X really kind of sums up how I've been feeling about this whole Dawn of X run. And so I promise I'll try to not hash over it anymore, but this one really had a good point to say, and I wanted to go over it. So with that said, if you've enjoyed this comic book, please first and foremost support your local comic shop, pick up a copy. If you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate it if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you can possibly know. Speaking of, we got some awesome things coming down the line, both for the YouTube channel, and after all the madness of this last year and a half, we may be having some upcoming events. So stay tuned for that, true believers. And as we finish up, please make sure to also hit that fancy little X bell next to subscribe. That way, as we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. Come to the channel, and we love to talk with you all and hear your feedback down in the comments below or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.